Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Moreno wash processed Honduras from Frukt Coffee. And there's the bag right there. And Frukt, based out of Turku, Finland. And there are coffee roasters that's appeared on this channel on numerous occasions, including our recent review of the Benjamin Paz, an anaerobic honey processed Honduran coffee. And when deciding which coffees to pick up from Frukt, this one did catch my interest largely because the other coffees we've either reviewed or didn't sound too exciting. And even though this one may not have necessarily sounded like the most exciting coffee out there, just being a standard wash processed Honduran Pacas coffee, I did want to review it given that we haven't reviewed as many Honduran coffees as I would like this year. So it'll be interesting to see how this one turned out, as this right here is day 51. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe at a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which does indicate a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this coffee. This one is also in line with our experiences with this coffee roaster, which we have identified as being on the lighter side of things. And I think if you're even comparing a lot of the Nordic-based coffee roasters in general, I can say that the vast majority of experiences that I have had from Frukt have skewed a little bit lighter than the other Scandinavian Nordic-based coffee roasters that we do review on this channel as well. And in our previous review, I made mention of the experiences that we've had from April recently, and I said that this one also skews a little lighter than that. So once again, that's the way we will identify the profile of this coffee as being on the lighter side of things by most standards and metrics, if nowhere near quite as light as the ultralight offerings that we also feature on this channel. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 16 first impression through the V60, and the coffee was already off to a very lovely start, as it does offer a traditional base contrasted by some wonderful fruit qualities, including plenty of the listed stone fruit characteristics. It is on the brighter and sweeter side of a Pacas coffee with a slight nuttiness and an overall well-balanced and rounded experience, so this was a very enjoyable first impression to this coffee. And if you watched the other review, the Benjamin Paz anaerobic honey processed Honduran coffee, then that one had the exact same flavor notes as this coffee did, and it was kind of an interesting dynamic to pick up two coffees, both of which Honduran, but two different processes that had the same description, to see how they would compare. It was just such a stark contrast between these two coffees, as this one definitely translated to the listed notes, while the anaerobic honey processed coffee certainly did not, based off my own experience. So I definitely had a very strong preference towards this one based off of that first try. Day 19 through the Chemex, and the coffee does have a similar impression this time around, as it's offering plenty of the complementary stone fruit characteristics to what is an otherwise more traditional base. Additionally, there's a nice butterscotch-like feel within the finish, giving the coffee some additional depth and sweetness, as it was another clean and enjoyable day. And I'm going to continue to highlight the sweetness of this coffee because in my experiences, I have not necessarily had the most sweet experiences with Pacas coffees, which is one of the reasons why I haven't picked up too many Pacas coffees up to this point. It's something that we review, I want to say, not too often, but every so often when I do see a coffee roaster that I like carrying one, I might branch out and try it, as was the case with this one. And so far it's paid off, as I've had two really enjoyable experiences to this coffee up to this point. Day 22 through the UFO Brewer, and the coffee does continue to have great consistency to it, as it does continue to offer plenty of the traditional qualities. But right off brew, it does settle into a more clean stone fruit-like sense with a bit of that butterscotch once again. And I can also see a little bit of a darker sweetness, something like a molasses to go alongside that. But for the most part, this coffee was just very sweet, very direct, and there was very little to add on this day as well, largely because this coffee has continued to remain very consistent based off these first handful of tries. Day 25 through the V60 with Frukt recipe, so 16:1 at 94 degrees Celsius, and the coffee is still nice, if maybe a little less fruit forward than the previous experiences. Still very sweet and traditional with more of those butterscotch and even molasses-like characteristics, but also a little bit of herbality in the finish when compared to some of the earlier days. So it's still nice, but I felt like toning this one down wasn't necessarily the best direction to go on this coffee. Day 28 through the Chemex with the same adjustments, and the coffee is the best it has been to this point, offering one of the sweeter experiences that we've had, especially for a Pacas coffee, as there's an almost candied honey peach sense to it, with it being less traditional today and much more fruit focused, which was very surprising to me. I have to say that I did not necessarily expect that. And I think I've heard that Pacas can be more fruit forward than traditional Central American forward at times. But that has rarely been the case with the Pacas coffees that I've had up to this point. But this one did seem to buck that trend, as on this day specifically, this is a highlight day. This is a standout day for this coffee, as this is one of the best experiences I've had from any Honduran coffee up to this point. So really impressed with this day 28 mark. Day 31 to the V60 with our standard recipe, and the coffee is back to being at its best, as it does have some great consistency to it, with it being sweeter than the normal experience with more of that rich candied honey peach quality to it. And again, I'm going to continue to go back and highlight the sweetness of this coffee because it did take me by surprise. Each and every time I did brew this coffee, I was skeptical to see if I would be able to replicate that very sweet experience, largely because I continued to think to myself, this isn't usually the way the Pacas coffees turn out for me, but this one just continued to turn out that way day by day with wonderful consistency. Day 34 through the Chemex with our standard recipe, and the coffee wasn't quite as impressive as some of the previous days, as it did skew a little bit more in the traditional sense, but still very clean, very well defined, with more of the butterscotch-like qualities to it and the richer Central American sweetness. So that's the main reason why I did opt for the V60, is because I think I had just slightly better consistency over the course of the days that we did brew it with that brew method. So on day 37, we went back to it one more time, and there was continued success with this coffee, as it does continue to remain super sweet, especially for a Pacas coffee, in an almost molasses and butterscotch-like sense. And the notes and descriptions of this coffee do continue to remain consistent, because this one was a very easy to read, very direct, very well-defined coffee throughout the entirety of it. Very stone fruit forward experience with a slight citric lemon brightness as well. A little nutty, some slight honeyed floral qualities once again, but the focus does continue to remain on the fruit characteristics throughout. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have quite a few level 4s. Let's go through those. We'll start with the cleanliness level 4. That was never in doubt. It was very obvious right from the start that this one was going to score a level 4. But going further than that, I do have to say, when it comes to washed Honduran coffees, this one is probably on the higher side of level 4. It might be the cleanest standard washed Honduran coffee that we've ever had as of this moment on this channel. So I was truly impressed by the way that this coffee turned out, especially in terms of the cleanliness. That is a very big victory for me. More than justified, more than earned level 4 on that one. Finish level 4. The finish is really pretty. Given that this coffee already has a very enjoyable start to it right off brew, and even in the intermediary, the finish is one of the more enjoyable aspects of this coffee, given that it does have that lingering sweetness to it, which gives this coffee just so much depth and so much enjoyment throughout. So happy with the way that the finish turned out in this coffee. Maybe one of the better aspects if it wasn't so stone fruit forward. Sweetness level 4, again, I was in shock. This is going to be one of the sweetest Honduran coffees that we've ever reviewed on this channel, and I've heard that Pacas coffees can be sweet. I've heard that Pacas coffees can be fruit forward, but this is the first time I've ever said I can definitely see that based off of the experience that we did have. I think that's a testament to just how well done this coffee was from the producer as well as the roasters. So level 4, more than justified. If anything, it's on the higher side of level 4, one of the sweeter Honduran coffees, in addition to easily the sweetest Pacas coffee we've had. Stone fruit level 4, that one is pretty self-explanatory. I've been highlighting that throughout the entirety of this review, as right from the onset I did have a lot of skepticism. I said, okay, a Honduran coffee that has a peach note, sure, it'll be there in a subtle, more secondary sense, but right from the onset, having it be so in your face, blatant and well-defined, not to the same extent as an Ethiopian coffee, but about as close as I could expect for a non-Panamanian Central American coffee. Truly impressed with the way that that turned out, more than justified there at that level 4 mark. Very peach forward. I can definitely see the apricot characteristics that they have on there as well. Let's go and move on to level 3s. We will start with the acidity level 3. I think that it's supposed to be a little brighter, and for a Pacas coffee, it is a little brighter. I've heard that they can also be on the brighter side of things, but this one right here, it's not to the same extent as your washed Kenyan coffee, and that's usually the litmus for what we can score at a level 4 in terms of acidity. So we kept it a little lower at a level 3, but once again, in comparison to Honduran and Pacas coffees, higher side of the level 3 for us. Plenty of brightness to this coffee as well. We will actually pause for 1 second and look at that level 2, which is right next to it, is the florality level 2. I can see some honeyed floral qualities to this one, but given that we usually do put a lot of coffees in that 3 and 4 mark for the florality, I think I just wanted to highlight that this coffee, it's so fruit forward, it's a little bit more traditional forward, that the florality is such a forgotten characteristic and quality to this coffee, given that it's in such a background sense, that I wanted to demonstrate that within this tasting wheel. It can be at a level 3. I feel like some people would put it at a level 3, a lot of the honey floral qualities to this one, but I just really wanted to showcase that in a tasting wheel like this to demonstrate that the fruit qualities, fruit characteristics were much more prominent. Let's go ahead and move on though. Level 3s we were discussing. So the citrus fruit level 3, I mentioned that there's a little bit of a citric brightness to this coffee. It is maybe a little generous to put it there at the level 3, but I did need something to kind of highlight where the brightness was coming from within this coffee. So citrus is what we opted for with that. Let's go ahead and move on to the caramel level 3. I mentioned the very enjoyable molasses and butterscotch-like characteristic, which is kind of surprising to me. I still believe that Frukt is roasting on a Loring, and I usually don't get a lot of those characteristics from Loring coffees. So really enjoyed that aspect of this coffee. Definitely came out of left field. Certainly was not expecting that. Savoriness level 3. There's a fair bit of a nutty characteristic for me, so that's where the savoriness does come from with this one. And then the final thing we're discussing, the body at a level 3. Plenty of body and texture to it. I think that was always fully expected. I did toy around with maybe putting it a little higher, closer to the level 4 mark, but I said it's medium bodied. I definitely feel like there are coffees we've had that have been more heavy than this one, so level 3 is where we opted to put that. Outside of that though, as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, with the exception of the florality, which can go in either direction, I do think it is a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. In the Benjamin Pass anaerobic honey processed review, I did mention that each Frukt review that we will be doing from that point going forward will increase the enjoyment exponentially. And in comparison to that coffee, I definitely had a very strong preference towards this one. It is night and day how much I enjoyed the differences between these two coffees. As going into it, this one is much more in line with my own preferences. This is the type of coffee that I fully expected to enjoy more among those two. But I was surprised to see just how much more I enjoyed this coffee, as this is probably my favorite wash processed Honduran coffee that we've reviewed up to this point. And that's a little bit of a spoiler because there's going to be one more coffee from Frukt that I did enjoy more than this one as well. And that's saying a lot given that this coffee was amazing. Easily my favorite Pacas coffee that we've ever reviewed by a wide margin, as I really enjoyed the clarity of this one. Terrific definition. I really enjoyed the stone fruit characteristics. I mean, it hit very high on three of the four most important qualities of a coffee for me: sweetness, cleanliness, and the fruit characteristics, especially when it does come in that stone fruit sense. So massive credit to the producer. I mean, Mario Moreno is a legend, and Frukt did an amazing job with this coffee as well. So credit to everyone involved in this one. Spectacular coffee. One of my favorite Central American coffees that we've reviewed this year in general. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. I say this a lot. There are people that do like lighter profiled, more traditional feeling coffees. I've said this with some of the coffees that we've had from Shoebox in the past, so the Bambito Típica, the Finca Los Angeles. And anytime we do get our hands on a coffee that is lighter profiled, maybe not quite as light profiled as Shoebox, but lighter profiled in general, that do still have those more traditional qualities, you can see how pretty they can present themselves, as was the case with this one right here. So keeping in mind still that lighter profile with much more sweetness, excellent clarity, and a more fruit-forward experience for a Central American coffee, then this one's a very good fit for you, as I found it to be an excellent fit for me. Kind of the best direction I can point somebody towards on this one, and also the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been your review of the Mario Moreno Wash Processed Honduras from Frukt Coffee. Thank you for watching.